Hey, folks, welcome to the Accessible Hunter podcast. I'm Greg Trainer along with my co host, Mike Hudson. We got a really special guest today. We have Marci Mowery from the Pennsylvania Parks and Forest Foundation. We're going to be talking to her shortly. But, Mike, what's going on in South Carolina, brother? You staying warm down there?
Oh yeah, man. You know it's getting crazy. Everybody's getting ready for this snowpocalypse we're all supposed to be getting, man. It's like that polar vortex is coming across and getting everybody crazy. You can't find groceries, man, and you know what? I don't know how it is in Pennsylvania, but you mentioned snow in South Carolina. Everybody's running for milk and bread. I really don't know what that's about because how do you combine the two? But just living the dream, man.
Buddy, we are expecting, according to the news, anywhere between like 6 and 12 inches on Sunday. And
Yeah,
my wife's going to go out this afternoon and pick up a couple of cans of propane for the Mr. Buddy heater just in case the power goes out, that we can keep
absolutely.
the one house or the one room in the house warm, kind of deal like that. So just a little bit of preparation on bad weather, and hopefully we don't get it. Prepare for the worst, but at least we'll have it. And Marcia, you're out in the eastern part of the state from me. First of all, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And Mike, I'm thinking bread and milk, bread pudding.
There you
Now you
go.
have me thinking about bread pudding.
There you go. Combination, man. Never put the two together.
There you go. That's one of my wife's favorites is bread pudding, and then she'll make a banana pudding that I
Oh,
really
that's
like
my
too.
jam right there.
Yeah,
That
so I'm
sounds good.
I'm gonna have to put in a request for this weekend, especially if we get snowed in for some pudding. But Marcy, thank you again. For the folks that don't follow your podcast or haven't followed the Pennsylvania Parks and Forest Foundation, would you mind introducing yourself a little bit and letting people know what you're all about and a little bit of your background?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you, Greg and Mike, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. The Pennsylvania Parks and Forest Foundation is a nonprofit that works with the 124 state parks and the 20 forest districts of Pennsylvania. We're fortunate here in PA that we have 2.5 million acres of state-owned land that is no admission fee, no parking fee. And so if you can get there, you can enjoy all the amenities that are there. We do a number of different things. We invest in projects, we get volunteer groups up and running, we call them friends groups. But we also have a mission of ensuring a place and an experience for everyone in the outdoors because
Hmm.
we know the physical, mental, and emotional benefits of being in the outdoors. And we want everybody to be able to experience those benefits. So one of the things we recently started doing is we do have a podcast. It's called The Think Outside with the Pennsylvania Parks and Forest Foundation. And the idea behind that is we can do lots of things outside. We can take our meetings outside. We can eat
Hmm.
our lunch outside, or we can visit our community or state parks, forests, etc. But getting people to think of what's near me, how can I spend some time outdoors?
You know, I absolutely love that mission. And you're right on key. There's so many things we can do outdoors. The outdoors just have a way of, to me, redirecting my chi, if you will. But just getting out of my head, getting out of my home for a little bit. I love the forward thinking that you guys have got going on. But when people talk about accessibility, they often think about wheelchairs and ramps and that kind of stuff. What else is accessible outdoors that you guys have seen, or what kind of projects are you working on currently?
We look at it from a very holistic perspective. We've been doing work with universal design.
Okay.
Some of that includes putting in accessible canoe and kayak launches, making sure
Yeah.
that they're usable by all populations, really making sure that we're taking everything into consideration. Is the parking lot accessible? Are there restrooms? But we've also done inclusive playgrounds. We have focused on fishing piers. We're
Hmm.
working on getting motorized chairs that could assist people to access trails they haven't been able to access before in a park or a forest. Um, but we also look at things like where is information placed? Is it on a bulletin board such that you can read it no matter where you're standing or sitting, your height? Can you get to the park or forest? We've been providing transportation scholarships to get school groups and community groups out and senior groups.
Wow.
Um, are there places to rest if you need those spots where you can just set and catch a breath? Are you informed so you can make an informed choice? Because we believe in challenge by choice, and we all have different needs. So, what information does a visitor need to know in order to make an informed decision about visiting that location? Um, we had put in what we thought was an inclusive playground. And then I was talking to a colleague who's like, what about elopement for children that may run or bolt? So we're like, okay, now we need to create a containment area around it because we hadn't thought
Right.
about that. So getting feedback from users and visitors is really important to us because we don't say that we know everything. We
Right.
all have different needs, so we love getting feedback from people. So in that case, with the playground, we're working on an interactive containment area so that it's part of the visitor experience. It's not a fence around a playground.
Yeah.
It's an interactive, like what birds would you see? Is your wingspan as wide as an eagle's wingspan? Things like that.
Wow, wow. You know, not having fences to bring it into the landscape that kind of contains or funnels, and to make it part of nature. That's just awesome that, you know, you're thinking that way. And
Right.
the podcast that you mentioned, Think Outside podcast, that's how I really started listening to you. You
Mhm.
were talking about older people, not just people with disabilities or children, but the older Americans that are trying to access the state parks. And I really loved that episode that you guys did, talking about getting people outdoors. And for all the reasons that you mentioned, that it's so healthy that, you know, you can go out, it doesn't cost you any money. You can enjoy nature, you can rest, you can enjoy everything that's going around you. You could meet your family there. You could have generations, you could have meetings outdoors. All these things that you're talking about, they all make sense, but I just never really thought about them as in depth as you've articulated on your podcast and what you're doing.
Thank you. I mean, some of the stories that have come back have been very heartwarming. When we did our first canoe and kayak launch, there was a woman who called me who had experienced balance challenges. And so she thought she had lost the ability to paddle. And all of a sudden, you know, because there was something stabilizing her boat, she was able to get in and out of the boat much more easily. And it came back to her. So she called me in tears to share her gratitude for being able to get back on the water. Um, you know, we hear stories all the time from people because, you know, our life journey, we never know where our life is going to take us.
Right.
And we have different needs throughout our lifespan. And so we really push the universal design because it benefits everybody.
Hmm.
It might be useful for a wheelchair, but it could also be useful for somebody pushing a baby stroller.
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know,
Or if you, yeah, go
I
ahead.
love it. I was going to say, I love the idea. Everything that you're saying is right on cue. And bigger than that, Marcy, you touched on something that most people don't do is we can't know everything about everything. So empathetic dialogue goes a long way and getting feedback, positive and negative, you know, that allows us to grow. And I absolutely am blown away by just thinking of all the concepts of opening the outdoors. Greg and I get to do these podcasts and we talk about it all the time. We can't make nature totally barrier free, but we can do everything we can to try to involve everyone. Nature's made for everyone. Um, and I'm just blown away. So the containment area, you kind of got me uh, thinking um, of ways that we can interact in those little areas to not draw borders, but to you know, just like you said, have interactive boards or whatnot along the way. What are some of the other activities that you guys have put in play that if you had somebody that was overstimulated, for instance?
Well, we've looked at areas you know, like maybe pup tents. They look like pup
Oh
tents, but
yeah,
it's a place where you could go get away from the stimulation.
isolation. I
So
like it.
isolation, quiet areas. One of our friends groups, Friends of Cook Forest, they put in a sensory trail. So
Hmm.
and part of the interpretation is in Braille, but it's a very quiet trail. There's a lot of aromas being
Yeah,
in the forest. There's things to touch if you want to have a tactile experience.
there you go.
So looking at it from that perspective. Um, we did a playground at Gifford Pinchot State, not a playground, a beach area that
Hmm.
is accessible. But we planted a lot of trees for shade, a place for people to withdraw, or if they need to regulate their body temperature, there were shaded
Mhm.
areas. And there are Moby mats. Are you familiar with
Oh yeah.
those? The
Yes,
mats that go
ma'am.
on the sand. And we put in a couple of Moby chairs, and we've gotten feedback from people that you had mentioned, I think, Greg, it was you that mentioned about family, is that, people that may not have been able to be in the water with their family now have this
Hmm.
experience of being able to be
Right.
in the water because of the chair giving them access across the sand and into the water.
Yep.
So we try to think about it from different perspectives. One of the projects we're working on right now, we're working with two other groups that gave us feedback on the design, and it changed the design significantly, but it's
Hmm.
making it more inclusive for everybody.
I'm so glad you mentioned the sensory trail because I had read about that. Here in PA, it's not too far from me, and it includes everybody, and it was wheelchair accessible, but also if you have a visual impairment or what have you, you could still experience so many stops along the way, and it wasn't a really long trail. I think maybe a mile loop, but it encompassed everybody and included everybody. And Marcy, when you're talking about designing and universal design, do you find that when you're putting in a new dock or a boat launch or something, are the accessibility features really cost prohibitive? Or if you're going to do a new trail, for instance, or a boat launch, what are we talking about on increasing the cost of the project to make it so everyone can use it?
It does increase the cost.
Hmm.
This canoe and kayak launch that we were looking at, we originally had gotten an estimate of in the high 40s thousand, like $49,000, and with the
Right.
design changes, we're up to about $59,000.
Okay.
Um, but it's worth the cost. And then
Yes.
we had some back and forth even with location. There was some push to maybe put it at another park, but the parking lot um, isn't very friendly. And where it's going to be, it's a very friendly parking lot. There is a paved trail all the way around the lake. So there are other options. So if somebody's driving, it's going to be at Locust Lake State Park. If somebody's driving to the park, they can have multiple experiences rather than just one. They can have,
Yep.
they can immerse themselves there for a day.
Yeah.
And you brought up a really good point about shade as well. Mike and I are both quadriplegics and we can't regulate our body temperature.
Hmm.
And it's great whenever we go to a park or go somewhere, but if we're in direct sun, we can't stay out there very long. So you're thinking about all the options, uh, you know, shade, places to pull off of the trail to rest. If you're in a manual chair, you can't go as far, maybe as Mike or I in a power wheelchair. And to have these areas built into the trail system in the parks, I think you're doing great things.
Thank you. We're also working with a couple of parks to try to have some hand crank loaner bicycles available.
Hmm.
Again, just adaptive equipment, having adaptive equipment available. And we work with our friends groups, and we've held some trainings for park and forest staff of understanding how to create inclusive environments.
Hmm.
My stepson is profoundly deaf, and but in some of the conversations we had initially, like, oh, I'd bring him up to stand beside me, and I'm like, when he was a teenager, that would have horrified him
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
to be brought
Any
up in front
teenager.
and
Yeah.
center. But there are ways that that you could engage him that would, he would be able to hear you, make sure there is like the ambient temperature, the ambient noise is diminished, etc. So helping educators and our friends groups. One of the big barriers for people are their fears, a fear of
Yeah.
ticks. We have a lot of Lyme disease in
Yes.
Pennsylvania, fear of snakes, or the cost, because they think we have this perception of what an outdoor person looks like,
Yes.
Hmm.
and so they feel like, oh, if I don't have all this gear, it's not, I can't participate. Well, you can,
Yeah.
so how do we lower that expectation of you have to look a certain way in order to be an outdoors person?
Yeah. You brought up something that it goes a long way. Moby mats. We've seen those. They're not as prohibitive with cost as, say, track chairs or whatever. And then those offer so much interaction with family. Strollers can go on them. Walkers, they have their dexterity issues, if you will. But just being able to get back out and go, opening up terrain always is one
Yes.
of the best things. What's some of the hardest projects or barriers that you guys come across just in park design?
I think time is one of the hardest
Oh yeah,
barriers. There are things that are put into place. We've had a park that was considered like above standard 30 years ago, but age has worn away, roots have
right.
come up,
Yep.
standards have changed. So I think being cognizant of evaluating
Yeah.
places on a regular basis. At one point, all the staff and some volunteers had been trained in doing ADA assessments. And we went out and we looked and we're like, hey, your concrete shifted and this is no longer accessible, or
Yeah.
that door is like slamming shut way too quickly,
Yeah. Yeah.
or the strength you need to pull it out. Or they put in a water fountain that's now projecting out. So if somebody has visual challenges, they might bump into it because their cane wouldn't find it, but it would hit them in the
Hmm.
body. So, looking at, what time does and how standards have changed. I remember going to one state park and they had an ADA campsite, and um, the fire ring was very close to a steep embankment. And it was like, even like, and anybody, like you're sitting in your chair, like you try
Yeah.
to get up and get your marshmallow or whatever. So like pointing things out to people. And,
Right.
one of our staff members, her husband has MS and he utilizes a wheelchair. And, I hear her frustration when she checks into a hotel and it says it's ADA,
Yeah.
Right.
and
Oh yeah.
it has a bathtub and it doesn't, not a
No
rolling
shower.
shower, and the bed is too high or too low.
Hmm.
So to me that's one of the things that we really need to be able to do is communicate what it is,
Hmm.
and to monitor to make sure the standards have changed, and to invite people in and say give us feedback on this.
Marcy, you had mentioned like track chairs in parks and how we're getting more mobility involved. What's the staff in the parks reaction to creating more mobility? Are they receptive on getting the chairs and making things more accessible for people? What's people's opinion on accessibility in the park systems?
I can't speak for everybody, but I know that it is something that there is a strong interest in both parks and forests. We have track chair. We're also working with Quantum for the Quantum
Yes.
Outback,
Yep.
and we're in a conversation with one of the forest districts right now, Susquehanna State Forest, to have a chair there. But it would also be able to be borrowed to be taken over to the Lumber Heritage Museum. There are several state parks there. So we're working through the user agreement on using the chairs. Um, we're looking at different types of chairs that have, some are more human powered, some are
Yeah.
electric. So again, challenge by choice. But for the most part, I would say they embrace it.
Mm.
Um, the one area where I sometimes see concerns is that if I'm saying that it's accessible, how do I ensure that it's maintained so that it truly is? And what if somebody
Right.
shows up and they're like, I
Right.
can't use this, I drove all this
Hmm.
way and I can't utilize it.
Yeah.
So that's an area
That
where there's concern.
it makes it difficult. We're trying to do a small project here, and I tell people all the time, I'm in a wheelchair user for 30 years. We're trying to make it wheelchair friendly because it's
Yes.
it's a constant update, and there's no way to make everything accessible for everyone. And so we try to be very accommodating, but you also have to understand that, this is outdoor settings. If we were going to just pour concrete everywhere, that's one thing, but we want to keep nature nature. And so we don't want to make a concrete jungle. And I'm sure you guys see it all the time. But I'm just trying to think of the overwhelming amount of property, 2 point whatever million you said, um,
2.5 million acres.
2.5 million acres. What kind of staff situation do you guys have?
That's we're the nonprofit. We don't
Yes.
operate the state parks and state forests, but we do
Right.
advocate for more staffing for state
Yeah.
parks and state forests because there isn't enough. We're operating at levels that, we're, from the late 70s, early 80s, but the visitation has increased.
Yeah,
And we saw, like many states during the COVID pandemic, we saw a real increase of people
right.
finding their parks and forests, and then that
Yes.
visitation has remained high. Our parks alone get over 42 million visitors a year,
Wow.
and it's harder to count forest visitation, but
Yeah.
you figure with 2.2 million acres, there's a lot of visitation there as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely. And, we are blessed here in Pennsylvania to have access to state game lands and state forest and parks.
Hmm.
I don't know of a lot of states that have the access that we do. And that all comes with a lot of hard work from your charity as well. And just the people that I get to interact with. If you meet a park employee or somebody connected to the park, they're always so kind and want to help, make things more accessible. And sometimes it's just a matter of pointing things out, like you said, about the water fountain maybe sticking out or having signs at the right height. As a wheelchair user, we're a little bit shorter than the average person, so we may not see a sign or something that's up a little higher for the average person.
Yeah. Or even the point signs. I mean, they put all the rules up and they're in like 4-point font. I'm like, I think
Right.
I'm the only person who has read it from start to finish with my magnifying glass. You know,
Yeah,
let's just pull out the important things that people need to know and make it in a font that people can actually read, because very few people can read 4-point font.
I,
Right.
as I sit here with my bifocals and
Right.
the 59-year-old eyes trying to read things, it can be a challenge, especially when you're a few feet away from something. You can't get
Hmm.
close to it.
Right. Or you're at an angle that's such you have to factor in glare,
Right.
because oftentimes they're up in the upper corner and it's like, let's bring them down
Right.
and
Right.
make them bigger.
Yeah. It makes it difficult. Aging's one thing about it, but Greg brought up something great that most people really don't understand is we're all heading towards an aging process where we're going to need some kind of assistive devices. And I understand the nonprofit. I run one as well. Where do you see most of your funding come from? Is it individual funding? Is it state mandated funding? I'm just curious.
For the work that we've done with accessibility, it's been a combination of private philanthropy from individuals.
Yes, ma'am.
We also receive support from American Legions, VFWs. We have received support from foundations.
There you go.
Like in here in central Pennsylvania, Partnership for Better Health has supported a number of projects to improve access. Um, they really get that connection. Globus
Absolutely.
Medical has been very supportive. So we try to work with. We just had a grant from AARP. Their communities just went out of my head, the name of the grant program. But part of what we did is we worked with libraries, because libraries are now libraries of things. So we
Yeah.
worked with libraries to get outdoor rec gear available that people could borrow,
Oh
so
yeah.
that
Love it.
they can use it in their community. And if they maybe get excited, they will go visit a state park or state forest, but they can check it out of the library.
Yep.
And so
Yeah.
we're also working with the Fish and Boat Commission to get, fishing tackling gear available in the libraries. And then also then trying to get some adaptive fishing equipment,
Yep.
so that if that's needed, it could be borrowed and utilized. So knowing that people might want to try something before they invest any funds, but
Sure.
also, maybe you just want to borrow it,
Right. Right.
pickleball. We've got
You
pickleball places, we put pickleball paddles in a couple of places. And
you just brought up a really great point. And, we have the Pennsylvania Assistive Technology Lending Library. And I did see that you had the program for borrowing lending gear. And I really think adapted fishing equipment would be so popular, adaptive shooting gear. If we could get some mounts and some trigger systems into the state parks for people to buy. Um, I just think lending libraries are awesome because adaptive equipment is so expensive. And if you have the opportunity to try it and see that it works for you before you buy it, that would be awesome if we could get more people in the outdoors that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe you just want to do it a couple times a year, so you don't want to invest the money, or you
Sure.
don't have a place to store it because, let's all face it, we takes a lot of storage to put all of our gear, so if you can
Right.
just borrow it, why
Does.
not
And
borrow it?
I always laugh that, a $3 water bottle is just as good as a Yeti $45 water bottle for my purposes on the afternoon out. The 2 hours that I'm at the park, I don't need a $45 Yeti when I can have a $3 bottle. So you don't always need the super deluxe, most expensive LL Bean gear or what have you. You can always work within your budget, especially if you're just going for a walk and enjoying a day trip.
Yes. And one thing we find is a barrier for people is not knowing the opportunities that exist.
Yeah.
So that's part of what we try to do. We have a passport to Pennsylvania state parks and state forests that people can buy from our website. We put things out on our website of like if you're near Pittsburgh, here are things within 30 miles where that you might visit. Or we put together a fact sheet on museums that are nearby parks and forests. So if you're visiting a park or a forest, go into the community and visit a museum because oftentimes outdoor recreation is also like history. So just
Right.
trying to get information into people's hands. That I've been in my position for almost 22 years now, and I've only done one presentation where somebody could tell me the depth and breadth that we had at that point that we had 121 state parks because people just don't know it.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, it happens to all of us. It's the one that's closest to us is the one that we probably know
Sure.
least about.
Yep, yep,
Right.
that's true. And Pennsylvania is fortunate that we have such a good rails to trails program.
Yes.
And if people can access that, it's usually pretty wheelchair friendly. For mountain bikes, but also for wheelchair use. I know here we have a couple of small trails that my wife and I have walked on, and the accessibility has been great. And then you were kind of mentioning getting into the museums in a town or other activities. If you can get to a brew pub or someplace for lunch right off of the park or the forest, that's always fun to make a day of it and to put a little bit of money back into the community surrounding the park.
Absolutely. And that's a goal of the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources is to close what they call trail gaps and to bring trails into communities so that people can have that community trail connection. But also, like at Canoe Creek State Park, they're working on building that connector to the Lower Trail, so you could be staying in the park and then go out onto the trail and removing the highways or the crossings, some of the challenges that they present.
Sure. That's great that you guys are going at it at a holistic design. And I wish more states would think about that, is keeping green spaces green. In South Carolina, we're growing so fast that everywhere you go is just concrete. And our state's really fighting right now to try to keep some of those green spaces in play. And it's just like anything else with encroachment. If we build all this stuff, where are the animals going to go? And then pretty soon we start losing taste. And I don't mean that in a tactile or whatever design, but it gets to the point where we see kids that are overstimulated by design with cell phones and all these devices. And I'm sure you see it from a health standpoint. It when you can take time to unplug just for a few minutes and watch the joy come back on somebody's face. That's what it's about. So I just wanted to pause for a second, give you kudos for your 22 years of fighting this fight, Miss Marcy.
Thank you.
And I wish more people took the time to understand just how important it is for us as humans just to be able to get back outdoors for a little bit.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
They talk about wanting to make sure that there's more cellular connection and more Wi-Fi. And
Right,
my husband and I serve as campground hosts. And when there's access, when you walk around the campground at night, you see people on their phones and they're not
right.
interacting. When there's no access, the phones are away and people are talking or they're playing games or they're going
Yes,
Yep.
for a walk or they're
yes,
looking at the stars. So I have really, I understand that we need this in communities so everybody has access and a lot of like remote workers, but I also have concerns that, we can't separate ourselves long enough to put it
Right.
away and say, I'm
Yep.
sitting around a campfire. I'm going to hang out with my friends or my family and I'm going to interact.
Right.
It can be tough sometimes to self-regulate and not check that text message whenever you hear it go off. And people have never been so available. If you text somebody and they don't text you right back,
Right.
you kind of get a little worried sometimes, or why isn't this person texting me back? 25 years ago, you would go all day without getting a message, and
Oh
if
yeah.
somebody called and left a message on your answering machine and you got back to them the next day, that was great. I'm not fighting technology or saying, oh, things are worse right now, but just sometimes it's good to put away the technology, or at least
Yeah.
put it in your backpack and say, I'm going to spend some quality time with my family or quality time with my friends and roast some marshmallows, or, go fishing with the grandkids this afternoon, and not check my email, not check text messages for the day, and just have a little bit of self discipline and receive back what the outdoors is willing to give you.
Right.
Yes. And I think one of those benefits is, we're seeing populations that are experiencing loneliness.
Yeah.
And I think I've read is, seniors are experiencing it, but also young men. Like I think it was between the ages of 18 and 23.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and separating yourself from the phone and having those human connections, having those conversations, maybe going out with a mentor and learning to fish, or being introduced to something new, or even volunteering. Like one of the things that we talk about, one of the values
Yes.
of volunteering is you can spend time with people that have similar values. You can learn a new skill and you can connect to people. And the loneliness factor concerns me, especially
Mm-hmm.
when you're watching advertisements. They're like, oh, now you can do all of this and you don't even have, you know,
Yep.
no, interact with people.
Right. Right. It's all about community and interaction and being able to bring people in there. Be present in the moment. Disconnect from some of
Yes.
these things and just spend time with your family. We see it so often in restaurants anymore where the whole family's sitting together and nobody's communicating.
Yes.
It drives me
Yes.
insane. So that's one of the things me and my wife do. Whoever's coming to our house, whenever we're having supper, disconnect. All we need is 30 minutes.
Right.
Spend time being in that moment. And we see it so often that you start having mental breakdowns, and I mean that in genuine. That
Yeah.
people just get overwhelmed, and like Greg said, if you don't get instant feedback from somebody, you automatically go to a worst case scenario. Guys, they may just be busy. It might be a potty break time. They may have wanted to disconnect from you just a second. Take a moment to breathe. But what kind of new projects do you guys have coming on the horizon?
Oh, what do we have? What the canoe and kayak launch at Locust Lake is one of the things that we're working on. And then, as I mentioned, the fence, coming up with the design for the
Yes,
fence.
ma'am.
We've been doing a lot of research, and what we envision doesn't really exist. So we see ourselves as maybe setting a new standard.
Innovators, right?
Yes.
Yes, yes, we like to be innovators. Um, we're messaging around America's 250, but a big part of that is freedom to explore and access for all.
Yes.
Yes.
And so we're really trying to elevate that message, and work with partners. Um, so we have a list on our website. We call them, it's the needs list. And, parks can tell us, what things that they want to work on. And a lot of that is access. So we, are constantly looking at that list and pairing it with potential funding partners. And then, working through all the steps that need to happen in order to make it a reality.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And, with us celebrating 250 years and access for all, I just think how far we've come, especially in the last 35 years or so with accessibility, and how far we can still go. I know
Right.
a lot of research and a lot of improvements still need to go, but people are at least thinking about accessibility for everyone, and that's
Hmm.
that's so encouraging.
Yes, it is encouraging. And I think when people can share their expertise, that's very helpful as well. And
Right.
Right.
if something isn't where it needs to be, or maybe standards have changed, or age has, pointing it out in a gentle, educating way goes a long
Yeah.
way.
And
Right.
you're a prime example of that you're taking feedback from the community and saying, hey, you guys are doing a great job on this, but what about this?
Yeah.
You're receptive to receiving feedback from, everybody in the community, whether they have a disability or not, but you're
Yes.
acting on those suggestions and making it just a better environment for everyone.
I'm a sponge for learning.
There you go. That's the daily cue right there. We as long as we can keep gaining that knowledge, it's one thing they can't take away from us.
That's right.
Absolutely.
And being able to get back out. And I love the idea of being able to interact with those, get out to your local museums, get out and see those features. And it just brings us together as a all wild, uh, holistic type of individual where it allows us to be a Renaissance person in that you can just reconnect and learn
Yes.
more about yourself.
Right.
Yes.
Marci, a lot of our listeners are into fishing and hunting.
Yeah.
We're Accessible Hunter podcast. How does your foundation and the forestry part of it? How does it tie into getting people in PA hunting and fishing? Do you kind of support that, or what's your position or the foundation's position on those recreations?
Actually, I am an angler. I'm not a hunter. My husband, I come from a hunting family. My husband is a hunter. So um, we do a lot of writing for Fish and Boat Commissions, their magazine,
Hmm.
talking about opportunities, trying
Love
to
it.
connect people to place. We have put in accessible fishing docks in several locations, fishing piers. We the same with hunting. We write for some hunting publications. We're going to be at an expo coming up in Lebanon in April, talking about opportunities. Um, we worked with Cook Forest State Park. There is actually a accessible hunting area. It was a piece of land that was donated, and we helped facilitate some of that. Um, so we try to help people understand where they can go, what the
Yeah.
opportunities are. And as I was mentioning earlier with the Fish and Boat Commission, they showed us a list of where all they have their free angling equipment in state
Hmm.
parks. And so our next step is to have conversations with some of those parks about getting accessible equipment that can be borrowed with the angling
Yeah.
equipment. So where we can, we try to make it more accessible, but we try to point people to the opportunities because 2.2 million acres of state forest, all open to hunting and angling, except, around safety zones. And
Right.
Yeah.
80% of state parkland is open to hunting.
It's
And most of them have lakes and streams as well.
it's
Yeah.
awesome that PA has several free fishing days. So in other words,
Yes.
you don't need a fishing license
Right.
on I think it's 4 days a year that you can fish anywhere in the state for free. Now, uh, bag limits and catch and release, that all applies. But wouldn't it be wonderful if the lending libraries could coincide with those fish for free days at the parks and lakes that you're associated with? That would be awesome.
Yeah. And some of them do.
And
Yeah.
and and you had mentioned the PA Game News that you guys do a lot of writing, and every year for Christmas, my wife gets me a subscription to the PA Game News, and it's just a great magazine, a great booklet that kind of highlights people of all abilities and young and old and their experience in the outdoors in PA. So, kind of like to
Yeah.
give a shout out to the Game Commission for what they do on that.
Yes, and we haven't written for them yet. We've written for Fish and Boat, and I'm trying to think of the name of the other publication. It might be called Hunters and Anglers. It's produced by Angle Printing and Publishing, and so we've been doing some writing for them. And there's a magazine in Northern PA that was a hunter oriented magazine that we provided some content.
Wow.
Well,
And
they got to
we've
step
done
their
restoration. We've done restoration to bring the grouse back, the woodcock.
Yes.
So some of those game species that have been impacted by habitat loss or climate change, or
right.
in the case of the grouse, West Nile virus.
Right.
Yes.
I was going to say those publications got to step their game up and get you guys involved. It's all about communication and being able to share those opportunities. But I'm just pigeon-toeing off of what Greg was just talking about. I truly thank you for being able to come on with us. And there's no doubt you guys have a monumental amount of partners. And we would love to be able to tag those at the end. But I know Greg just had another question. I stepped on his toes, so go ahead, Greg.
Oh, oh no, I was just going to say, growing up, we had some grouse hunting opportunities that were pretty prevalent, and over the last 10 years or so, they've kind of gone down, but we do see it rising again, along with the stalking of pheasants. The
Yeah,
PA Game Commission does a great job getting pheasants back out because growing up, we didn't really have a lot of pheasants like my dad had growing up.
yeah,
So
Right.
yeah,
the conservation and everything that you are doing and being a part of that, it's so enjoyable for everybody that's hunting. But also, if you're out walking and you jump a grouse, it's going to scare the bejeezers out of you.
Yes,
For
had that
that,
happen.
yes, for those that know, it's like a helicopter going off right at your feet. But you don't have to be a hunter to enjoy
yep,
getting game animals back into nature.
yeah,
And also, a lot of the work that we're doing is supporting other songbirds, supporting other
Yes,
types
right.
of birds and wildlife. So
habitat.
again, it has a lot of benefit.
Well, Marcy, we so appreciate you coming on today. Is there anything that you'd like to end the podcast with today for us? Is there anything that we could do to help with donations, or if people want to get a hold of you, or is there anything that you'd like to wrap up the podcast with?
Um, First, again, I want to thank you for reaching out to me and for inviting me to join you on Accessible Hunter. And we will share your podcast out through our weekly Take Five Fridays with Pam, which is a weekly newsletter that we do
Thank you.
that lets people know what's happening. I would just encourage people, visit our website at paparksandforests.org. Maybe you can link it into the show notes, especially if you go to the About Us publications page. There's a lot of
Right.
free material that people can download to help them explore Pennsylvania's parks and forests. And under special funding initiatives on another page, is where some of the work that we're doing to increase accessibility, those projects are listed.
Fantastic.
Our goal this year is, in honor of the 250, is to raise $250,000 for more accessibility work.
Awesome,
Wow.
awesome.
Thank you guys for everything that you do, and I truly appreciate you taking time. I know it's extremely busy. You got other things going on, but I just appreciate you coming on and being able to share so much. It's overwhelming to think about all the parks and recs that are out there, but the opportunities too, just to get people out of their head and home for a little bit. So thank you for all you do.
You're quite welcome. Thank you. And it was wonderful talking to you both. It's been quite fun.
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely. It was a great afternoon. And Marcy, thank you for your participation. And folks, really check out the website and see the great things that Marcy and her team are doing. And we appreciate you listening to the Accessible Hunter podcast. Thank you so much.